Who is the frontrunner in the Republican presidential race? Donald Trump or Ben Carson? The doctor has just vaulted past the Donald in yet another national poll. Carson is ahead by 6 points in an NBC News Wall Street Journal survey at 29%. So what does Trump have to say about the latest polling?
I like Ben, but Ben can't do the job. I mean, there's no question about it. He can't do the job. He's not going to be able to negotiate with China. Our trade deals are a horror. Our military is a mess.
You don't think Ben Carson can do that, rise to the occasion?
No, I don't think he can. No, I don't think he can do that. I think he cannot make deals with China. I think he cannot make deals with Japan.
What do you think it is about Ben Carson that a lot of people are going, Mom, there's something about him?
I really don't know. I think he's a nice person. I like him, but I don't really understand it.
Okay, so that was this morning on Fox and Friends, and Trump came out in epic form to greet them on the couch and then answered the questions, Dana, to talk about the latest polling. But his main criticism was, listen, I don't think this is a guy that can get deals done.
So this is what happens when you have candidates that are in competition. And what I think that Donald Trump does very, very well is he recognizes his opponent's weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So his opponent, like a lot of people would think one of Ben Carson's strengths is that he is nice. What Trump is able to do is to take somebody's perceived strength and turn it into a weakness by saying, basically what he's saying is that he won't be tough enough to negotiate with China, therefore you should look to me to do that because that is something that's on the minds of the American people. So when he's trying to define somebody else, I think he does a pretty good job of it.
Okay. Eric, how did you see it? I mean, he came out, I thought, which was a good response, which was, listen, I'm the guy for business, to getting deals done, getting the economy going in this country, which is a very important point, especially when you look at the polling about what people care about.
Right. And when you do look at the polling, 41% said that Donald Trump will be, as far as the economy and business goes, he would be their choice. What you really need to see in the poll, and these polls are going to jump around a little bit, right? What you need to see in the polling is that between Trump and Carson, the two outsiders have 50%. They have it locked up. I mean, they have 50% of the leaning Republican voters. I mean, if they were smart, they would just continue not to take too many harsh shots at each other, continue to own the vote, and then hash it out at the end, right? Because right now it's going to be a game of attrition. What happens now? There's like 6 or 7 that are probably on the bubble. 3 or 4, probably Jeb stays in, Marco Rubio stays in, 1 or 2 stays in, and then you're down to a real race. But they think about that. 2 people out of 14 have more than half the vote. That's amazing.
Unbelievable. What does it say about the rest of the crew, Jesse?
The rest of the crew is not doing too well, so they need to start getting some of these voters. I do think I think it's a Herman Cain situation. This guy was ahead of Romney back then. This is kind of a mirage, this phenomenon right now. This is the poll that the media has been rooting for, and they finally got it. Yeah, this Ben Carson situation. I think his support is soft. It's not deep. When I'm out in the streets, people come up to me. They don't talk about Carson. They talk about Donald Trump. I don't see a lot of Carson paraphernalia out there. You know, I don't know if he's even staffed up. He's got a huge burn rate. I just don't see it right now. I think Trump right now, I think maybe last debate, he didn't have the moment. And that hurt him. Last cycle, we talked a lot about Biden and Benghazi and Hillary, and he's kind of laying back and trying to lock in the support. He hasn't been talking about illegal immigration as much. I think he needs to be more consistent about that. But he's got the big SNL thing coming up this weekend. He's got the book tour. He's going to be zigzagging across the country. I think it's going to be fine for the Donald.
Maybe it works even to his advantage, Juan, because, you know, when you're on top for that long, this gives a little bit plus or minus margin of error and maybe gives a chance for him to get back up on top versus staying there the whole time, you know.
Well, I just think he's having a very strong reaction. This is the first time I think it's since June that he hasn't been the #1 in the Republican field. And so it's not only Carson that he's going after, Kimberly. He's going after Jeb Bush. He says Jeb Bush should drop out. He said Marco Rubio is overrated. So he's definitely feeling like, hey, I'm punching back. Time for the counterpuncher to start counterpunching. I would agree with Jesse. I think this is a very fluid field. I don't think anything is set. I think the most interesting aspect is the electorate. I mean, Republican voters clearly don't want the status quo, which is what Eric was talking about. They are right now looking for someone who is that outsider, so you get 50% about for Trump and Carson. But then you think about who are the other two at the top. They're not at the top level, but the second level, which would be Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Well, Ted Cruz, in my neck of the woods, is viewed as, oh, my God, it's Ted Cruz. You can't play with him. This is other Republicans talking. And, I mean, if you talk about Marco Rubio, people are saying, like, well, he's a nice kid. He's young. They don't have a whole lot of sense of him having the experience to get in there and do deals. I will say this about the Donalds thing. Oh, he has experience doing deals with the Chinese government, dealing with domestic and international politics.
Doing deals.
It's a business deal. A deal between me and you is far different than if Kimberly and Jesse and Dana say, "Oh no, we have something to say about what Juan and Eric are doing."
Whether it's New York or Beijing, why is that different than doing a deal with the president, the premier of China? What's the difference? You negotiate. You try and get the best for your side.
Because Eric, in this kind of deal, you have so many hands. You could have a Senate that says to you, "We don't like your deal."
No, Juan, I understand that politics is not business, but the art of the deal, as he writes, it goes across all the spectrum, not just a business deal.
I'm just saying,
it probably even goes across a romantic deal too. You want to sell someone on you, you put your best foot forward.
Yeah, but that's
she buys into it.
Let's say
that's how you got Adrian.
Yeah, so between you and your wife, that's one deal. But imagine then your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, the kids, everybody else is like, "What? Eric, keep your hands to yourself."
Any guy that deals better than the president right now would be an upgrade. I mean, think about it. We had Bergdahl. We had the troops out of Iraq. You had Iran. I wouldn't knock Trump's deal making. I think the guy in the White House right now is not doing a very good job. Anything's better than him.
Throw one more thought in here.
Except for Hillary.
One thought. So in a week, there's going to be a Fox Business debate. It's going to be on the economy the way that it should have been on the economy with CNBC. Think about this for 1 second. So Trump is going to come off this weekend. He's going to have the NBC Saturday Night Live thing. And then they're going into an economy debate. Now, Trump versus Ben Carson in the economy. I love Ben Carson.
Yeah.
But he's probably going to get his lunch eaten by Trump in a debate about business and the economy. Ben's a great guy, but if you push him on numbers, he's a little less than solid on numbers.
Oh, come on. Let me just say, you haven't seen
No,
Ben.
I agree.
No,
You're
it's not
disagreeing?
true. It's not true. Ben has not had his lunch eaten at any of these debates. He has been, and I will say this, low energy. People say, he kind of disappeared or something. But you notice what?
Yeah, but
the electorate likes him. They know that he
had to go
says
back on some of the stuff
controversial.
he was talking about, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah, I agree.
But
he says strongly conservative things, not to my liking, but strongly conservative things. The base knows who he is, and they find him less objectionable than Donald Trump. That's what these polls are telling you, Eric.
Juan has a man crush on Carson. It's official.
No, I do find it curious, though, that if Donald Trump is on top in the polls, then that is a good poll. If Carson is obviously on top in this poll, then that poll should be questioned, or Carson is to be questioned. Here's the thing, I think, on the bigger scale, and you mentioned Herman Cain. In 2004, John Kerry was way down at this point in the election. He comes back to win Iowa, and then he gets the nomination. Same with Obama, same with McCain, same with Romney. So I'm not saying that history is necessarily going to repeat itself this year, but I just think everyone should just chill out for just a minute and
take a moment
and let these debates take place. Let them try to run their races. I mean, it is not over, and I'm looking forward to the debate next week because I do think it will be a different one. You will have a different tone, and they will have to answer very substantive questions and follow-ups, unlike the Democrats that didn't have to do so in their previous debate.
And that poll does show Rubio really surging. The Rubio phenomenon is real. He had a great debate last time. And you can tell because Donald's starting to attack him. He came out today. He said he was a disaster with the credit cards. Kind of insinuated he was a little corrupt when he was running the show down in Florida. He says he sweats a lot. He says he's weak on immigration. So, Donald may be distracted putting down Jeb or, going after Carson, but I think Rubio is kind of a threat right now.
I think he thinks he said, I killed off Jeb too soon.
Yeah,
now
he needs to revive him.
Elevate Rubio. But just to make your day, Jesse, I got a little bit more Trump for you.
Okay, bring it on.
Earlier, Trump held a news conference in New York City and used the opportunity to take some more shots at his opponents.
You look at Ben, he's very weak on immigration. I think that really Marco is overrated. My Jeb impression? No, I don't want to do that. I don't like showing a person sleeping at a podium. You need a very strong person with tremendous energy. Thank you very much, folks. I'll take the job.
Okay, and he's also calling on some of them to get out of the race.
Do I think it's time to have some of the other Republican candidates drop out? Yes. There are too many people. Well, I don't want to get personal, but you can look at the poll numbers. Look, if a person's been campaigning for 4 or 5 months and they're at 0 or 1 or 2%, they should get out. Look at me. I go to Florida and look at the numbers that just came out in Florida. 37%. Georgia. I mean, those are real numbers. Do they do this for their brand? Because I happen to think it's very bad for their brand.
All right, so he's obviously a very confident person, and he's got a message, and he's staying on it. Is this going to be able to win the day? Is this going to resonate with voters, or is it starting to backfire a little bit?
I actually think, and now, you know, I've talked about Trump quite a bit, but I actually think that his support is higher than these polls are showing. These polls are done randomly, the dial polls, the landline polls. We're steering away from online polls. He seems to have some sort of groundswell support that isn't your typical voter. Maybe people haven't never even
Were you
picked up
saying
the
this
phone.
a few weeks ago?
What?
Somehow that the polls were illegitimate when Trump was on.
No. I'm saying no. I'm not saying polls are illegitimate. I think they're polling accurately the way they're making their polls. But if you look at the online polls, they show a vastly different picture. They show Trump leading everyone by quite a bit. Maybe because these are typical landline 400 phone calls made via landline. I don't even have a landline in my
Well,
home.
I'm just saying, you got Wall Street Journal now. You had New York Times. The polls are very similar, right? So you have two different, highly credible polls.
Right.
I will say
What
this.
do you attribute it to?
What do I attribute this to? I think the pie is not baked, or it's everything is fluid, and people think maybe Trump's a little brash and harsh and big on himself, you know, egotistical. And gee, this other guy's kind of quiet. But I think Jesse's right. You look at the numbers and you think people aren't saying they're committed to Carson. They're just saying right now they like Carson. And I think
Trump
they like
is
him
still winning
compared
in
to
almost
Trump.
every single primary state by wide margins.
Which is big.
He is the expected nominee
right.
among
Yes.
Republicans by
Yes.
double digits over Carson, and is expected to take on the Democrat nominee. So I don't think it's like all over for Trump. I think everybody's wishing it to write the story that Trump's on the decline. I think he's sitting pretty right now.
Well, it's still early, and Newt Gingrich, Dana, has also said that, you know, there's going to be still movement, things happening. He doesn't necessarily think the outsiders like Carson and Trump are going to be out of the game, but there are some people saying, well, perhaps we're beginning to see a little bit of that, you know, wearing off, and perhaps some of the other candidates we've seen elevated, like
Well, Gingrich
Rubio.
would know. Okay, he was one of those people. I mean, I think I think that history as a guide, you would have to just think that maybe there's going to be some additional changes. The election is not tomorrow. And if it was, then maybe Ben Carson would win. The other thing I would point out is that there's a lot, after last week's debate, and a lot of conservatives on the right were complaining about the debate structure because they said Republicans shouldn't go out and just beat each other up all the time and give the Democrats all sorts of weaknesses about the Republican field. What we just saw in Donald Trump's press conference was one after the other systematically going down the line and pointing out all the weaknesses and not saying, this is what I'm going to do for the country. Maybe that's entertaining. But to me, I think that he's actually doing what everybody said that we didn't want to do in the aftermath of those debates.
Well, we've all talked about wanting a competitive primary, and when people that we like get attacked, then we say, oh, you know, we have to unite, and then when people don't attack, you have to say, listen, you know, it's not a coronation. So I think, like you said,
So what?
It is fluid, and people are going to do what they have to do to win this thing.
Well, and you got a lot of people making positive strides. You've got Rubio, you've got Cruz, you've got Christie. I mean, people are far from giving up at this point, and Jeb's got a revamp. That's why we love this show so much to talk about.